He walked in at the worst moment. Why did the stable hand freeze when he saw the giant blacksmith? The barn door swung open with a groan that echoed through the dusty air, and I froze. My hands were still gripping the wooden beam above my head, my shirt discarded somewhere in the hay, sweat gleaming across my bare chest and shoulders in the late afternoon light streaming through the slats. I'd been working alone, or so I thought, trying to replace the damaged crossbeam before anyone noticed. I'd nearly brought the whole damn loft down yesterday. But there he stood in the doorway, massive and backlit like some kind of avenging angel, his shoulders so broad they nearly filled the frame. Garrett. The blacksmith who'd arrived at the ranch 3 months ago and turned my entire world sideways without saying more than a dozen words to me. The man whose presence made my heart hammer in my chest like a wild thing trying to escape. And now he was staring at me with those storm-gray eyes, his expression unreadable, while I stood there half-naked and caught in the act of trying to hide my own mistake. My voice came out rough, breathless. I didn't know anyone was still here. He didn't move, didn't speak. Just stood there with his leather apron still tied around his waist, a hammer hanging from one massive hand, watching me with an intensity that made my skin prickle with awareness. The silence stretched between us like a physical thing, heavy and charged with something I couldn't name but felt in every nerve ending. "You're gonna hurt yourself," he finally said, his voice low and rough as gravel, "doing that alone." My grip on the beam tightened. "I can manage." "Can you?" 2 words, that was all it took. 2 words in that deep, rumbling voice, and I felt something shift in the air between us, something that had been building for months without either of us acknowledging it. Something dangerous and thrilling and absolutely terrifying. I should have climbed down, should have grabbed my shirt and made some excuse to leave. But I couldn't move, couldn't look away from him, couldn't do anything but stand there suspended in that moment, wondering what the hell was happening and why my heart was racing like I'd just run a mile. Garrett took a step into the barn. Then another. And I knew with absolute certainty that nothing between us would ever be the same again. My name is Elijah Carter, and I've worked at the Copper Creek Ranch since I was 17 years old. Started as a stable hand, mucking out stalls and learning everything I could from the older ranch hands who'd spent their whole lives working with horses. Now at 23, I was one of the senior hands, trusted with training the younger horses and managing the stables when the foreman was off the property. It was honest work, hard work, and I loved every minute of it. The ranch sprawled across 3,000 acres of Montana wilderness, with the Bitterroot Mountains rising up in the distance like ancient guardians. We ran cattle and bred quarter horses, and during the summer months we took on guests who wanted to experience the authentic cowboy experience, whatever that meant. Most of them left after a week with sore muscles and a new appreciation for just how hard ranch work actually was. I'd grown up in the small town of Copper Creek, population 800 and declining. My parents had died in a car accident when I was 15, leaving me with my grandmother who'd passed 2 years later. The ranch owner, Mr. Harrison, had known my family and gave me a job when I needed it most. He'd given me a place to belong when I had nowhere else to go. The other ranch hands became my family, the horses became my passion, and the ranch became my home. I was good at my job. I showed up early, stayed late, and never complained about the long hours or the backbreaking work. I kept my head down, did what needed to be done, and tried not to think too much about the fact that I was 23 years old and had never really figured out who I was or what I wanted from life beyond the next day's work. That all changed the day Garrett Blackwood arrived at Copper Creek Ranch. It was early March, and we'd just come through a brutal winter that had tested everyone's endurance. The old blacksmith, Pete, had finally retired after 50 years of shoeing horses and repairing equipment, and Mr. Harrison had been looking for a replacement for months. Finding a good farrier and blacksmith willing to work on a remote ranch wasn't easy, and we'd made do with traveling farriers who charged a fortune and weren't always available when we needed them. When the big black truck pulled up to the forge building that cold March morning, I was leading a young mare named Daisy out to the paddock. I glanced over, curious about the new arrival, and stopped dead in my tracks. The man who climbed out of that truck was the biggest human being I'd ever seen in my life. He had to be at least 6'5", maybe taller, with shoulders that looked like they'd been carved from granite and arms thick as fence posts. His hair was dark brown, almost black, worn a little long and tied back at the nape of his neck. He had a close-cropped beard that outlined a strong jaw, and even from 50 feet away, I could see the intensity in his eyes as he surveyed the forge building and the ranch beyond. He moved with the kind of quiet confidence that comes from knowing exactly what you're capable of, every motion deliberate and economical. He wore worn jeans, heavy work boots, and a flannel shirt with the sleeves rolled up despite the cold, revealing forearms roped with muscle and marked with old scars, the kind you get from working with hot metal and sharp tools for years. I stood there staring like an idiot while Daisy nickered impatiently and tugged at her lead rope. "That's the new blacksmith," said a voice behind me, and I jumped. It was Marcus, one of the older hands, grinning at my obvious surprise. "Harrison found him down in Wyoming, supposed to be the best farrier in 3 states. Bit young for that kind of reputation, but I guess we'll see." "How old is he?" I asked, trying to sound casual and failing miserably. 30, 31 maybe, keeps to himself from what I hear. Built that whole forge setup he brought with him by hand. Man's an artist with metal, apparently. I watched as Garrett started unloading equipment from the truck bed with an ease that suggested the heavy anvil he was carrying weighed nothing at all. Mr. Harrison came out to greet him, and even our rancher, who stood a solid 6 feet himself, looked small next to the blacksmith. "Come on," Marcus said, elbowing me gently. "Quit gawking and get that mare settled. We've got work to do." I forced myself to look away and led Daisy to the paddock, but my mind wasn't on my work anymore. It was on the man who just arrived at Copper Creek Ranch and the strange, inexplicable pull I'd felt the moment I laid eyes on him. For the first month, Garrett and I barely exchanged more than polite nods. He worked in the forge from dawn to dusk, setting up his operation and getting familiar with the ranch's needs. I saw him occasionally when I brought horses over for shoeing, but he was always focused on his work, speaking only when necessary and offering nothing personal about himself. The other hands gossiped about him during meals and evening downtime. Nobody could get a read on the man. He was polite but distant, competent but uncommunicative. He lived in the small cabin behind the forge building, took his meals alone, and didn't join the ranch hands for the Friday night poker games or weekend trips into town. "Maybe he's just shy," suggested Tommy, one of the younger hands. "Shy?" Marcus laughed. "That man ain't shy, he's just got no interest in making friends." "Or he's hiding something," said another hand, Jake, with a knowing look that made my stomach clench uncomfortably. I stayed quiet during these conversations, listening but not contributing. The truth was, I couldn't stop thinking about Garrett, not in a way I understood or could explain, but in a way that made me hyper-aware of his presence whenever he was nearby. I found myself looking for excuses to walk past the forge just to catch a glimpse of him at work. I noticed things about him that I had no business noticing. The way his shoulders moved when he hammered hot metal, the concentration in his expression when he trimmed a hoof, the rare half-smile that appeared when he got a shoe perfectly fitted. It was ridiculous. I was acting like a teenager with a crush, and I didn't even understand why. I'd never felt anything like this before, this magnetic pull toward someone, this constant awareness, this need to be near them even when I had no logical reason to seek them out. I told myself it was just fascination. Garrett was different from anyone else on the ranch, impressive in his skill and his presence. It made sense that I'd be curious about him. That was all it was, curiosity. I was very good at lying to myself in those early days. The first real conversation we had happened in mid-April during a particularly difficult shoeing job. One of our most valuable breeding stallions, a temperamental beast named Thunder, had thrown a shoe and needed a replacement. Thunder was notorious for being difficult to handle, and it usually took 3 men to get him shod safely. I was helping hold Thunder steady while Garrett worked, standing at the horse's head with a firm grip on the halter and speaking in low, soothing tones. Thunder was dancing nervously, ears pinned back, muscles tense and ready to explode. "Easy boy," I murmured. "Nobody's gonna hurt you, just stand still for a minute." Garrett worked with calm efficiency, his movements steady and sure despite Thunder's agitation. He spoke to the horse too, his deep voice a rumbling counterpoint to my softer tones, and gradually Thunder began to settle. It was like watching a master at work. Garrett never forced anything, never got frustrated, just patiently worked with the horse's nature rather than against it. By the time he'd finished, Thunder was standing almost placidly, his head lowered and one ear swiveled toward Garrett as if listening to his quiet reassurances. "You're good with him," I said as Garrett straightened, wiping sweat from his forehead with the back of his hand. He glanced at me, those storm-gray eyes meeting mine for just a moment, and I felt something jolt through my chest. "He's not mean, just scared. Big difference. Most people don't see it that way. Most people don't pay attention." He ran a hand down Thunder's neck and the stallion leaned into the touch. "Animals are honest, they don't hide what they're feeling, makes them easier to understand than people." There was something in the way he said it that made me think he was speaking from experience, like he'd been hurt by people who hadn't been honest with him. I wanted to ask, wanted to know more, but Garrett was already stepping back, gathering his tools. "Thanks for the help," he said, and that was it. The conversation was over. But something had shifted. He'd let me see a tiny glimpse beneath that stoic exterior, and I found myself wanting more. Over the following weeks, our interactions became more frequent. It started small, Garrett asking me about specific horses' temperaments before shoeing them, me offering to help with particularly difficult jobs. We developed an easy working rhythm, communicating more through gestures and glances than words, both of us comfortable with the quiet that existed between us. I started bringing him water during the hottest part of the day when the forge turned his workspace into an oven. At first, he just nodded his thanks and went back to work. But after a few weeks, he started pausing to actually drink it, and sometimes we'd stand together in the shade for a few minutes, watching the ranch activity in companionable silence. "You've been here a while," he said one afternoon, the most personal statement he'd made to me yet. "6 years since I was 17. He nodded, his eyes on the mountains in the distance. "Good place to land." "Yeah, it is. No family." The question was quiet, careful, like he knew he might be stepping on painful ground. "Not anymore. Parents died when I was 15. Grandmother raised me until she passed. Harrison gave me a job when I needed one." "I'm sorry." "It was a long time ago." I paused, then took a chance. "What about you? You got family somewhere?" His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Not anymore." The way he said it closed the door on that topic completely, but I'd learned something important. Garrett understood loss. Whatever had happened in his past, he'd left more than just a job behind when he came to Copper Creek Ranch. As spring turned toward summer, I found myself looking forward to these brief moments of connection more than I wanted to admit. Garrett was slowly becoming less of a mystery and more of I didn't know what exactly. A friend, maybe, something more than an acquaintance, certainly. But there was always this underlying tension whenever we were together, this awareness that made my pulse quicken and my thoughts scatter. I caught him watching me sometimes when he thought I wasn't looking. Just brief glances, his expression unreadable before he'd turn back to his work. Each time it happened, I felt that same jolt in my chest, that same inexplicable pull. I didn't understand what was happening between us. I didn't have the language for it, didn't have the experience to recognize what these feelings meant. I just knew that Garrett Blackwood had walked into my life and somehow, without trying, had become the most important person in it. And that terrified me more than anything I'd ever experienced. The turning point came in late June during the busiest time of the ranch season. We had a full house of guests, the cattle were being moved to higher pastures, and we were in the middle of breaking a new group of young horses. Everyone was working 16-hour days, exhausted and running on coffee and determination. I was in the breaking pen with a particularly stubborn 2-year-old gelding named Copper, trying to get him accustomed to the saddle. He was having none of it, bucking and spinning every time I tried to settle the saddle on his back. I'd been at it for over an hour, my shirt soaked with sweat, my arms trembling with fatigue. "Need a break." I turned to find Garrett leaning against the fence, watching with his arms crossed over his chest. The forge was closed for a rare afternoon off, and he'd apparently decided to spend it watching me get my ass kicked by a horse. "I'm fine," I said, probably sounding less convincing than I intended. "You're exhausted, you've been out here since dawn. So has everyone else." Everyone else didn't spend half the night repairing the south fence because Jake was too drunk to finish the job. I stared at him, surprised he'd noticed. I'd done that work in the dark, thinking no one knew about Jake's screw-up. "How did you?" "I don't sleep much." He pushed off the fence and climbed over it with an ease that shouldn't have been possible for someone his size. "Let me help." "You don't have to." "I know." He walked over to where Copper was eyeing us both with suspicion. "But I want to." For the next hour, Garrett and I worked together with Copper. He had an incredible gift with horses, a patience and gentleness that seemed at odds with his intimidating size. He never raised his voice, never made sudden movements, just waited for Copper to trust him, and slowly, impossibly, the horse did. By the end of the session, Copper was standing calmly with the saddle on his back, accepting treats from Garrett's huge hands with a gentleness that made my chest ache. "How do you do that?" I asked, genuinely amazed. Garrett's lips quirked in that rare almost smile. Same way you do anything worth doing, patience, respect, understanding that trust is earned, not demanded. He turned to look at me then, really look at me, and the world seemed to narrow down to just the two of us standing in that dusty pen with the late afternoon sun painting everything gold. His eyes held something I couldn't name, something warm and careful and maybe a little afraid. "You're good at what you do, Elijah," he said quietly. "You care about these animals, about this place, about the people here even when they don't deserve it. That means something." No one had ever said anything like that to me before. No one had ever really seen me, not the stable hand, not the orphan making his way in the world, but me, the person underneath all of that. "Thank you," I managed, my voice rough with emotion I didn't fully understand. Garrett held my gaze for a moment longer, something unspoken passing between us before he cleared his throat and stepped back. "I should get back, but Elijah?" "Yes. Take a break sometimes. You can't take care of anything if you don't take care of yourself first." He left the pen before I could respond, walking back toward the forge with that steady, confident stride, leaving me standing there with my heart pounding and a strange warmth spreading through my chest. That night, lying in my bunk in the ranch hand's quarters, I couldn't stop thinking about the way Garrett had looked at me, the way he'd said my name, the way his presence had made me feel both safe and terrified at the same time. I'd spent my whole life knowing I was different somehow, never quite fitting in the way other guys seemed to. I'd watched my friends develop crushes on girls, talk about dating and sex and relationships, and I'd felt nothing but a vague sense of disconnection. I told myself I just wasn't interested in that stuff, that I was focused on work and building a life for myself. But lying there in the dark, with the sound of other ranch hands snoring around me, I couldn't deny the truth anymore. What I felt when I looked at Garrett wasn't curiosity or admiration or even friendship. It was attraction. The realization hit me like a physical blow. I was attracted to Garrett, to a man. I thought about him constantly, looked for excuses to be near him, felt my heart race when he looked at me, and the truly terrifying part was that I thought maybe, possibly, he might feel something similar. I spent the rest of the night staring at the ceiling, my mind spinning with implications and fears and a strange, tentative hope that scared me more than anything else. I'd spent 6 years at this ranch building a life, earning respect, making a place for myself. If anyone found out I had feelings for another man, if anyone even suspected, everything I'd built could come crashing down. This was rural Montana, not some progressive city where being different was accepted or even noticed. Out here, being gay was still something whispered about, joked about in cruel ways, used as an insult. I thought about Jake's comment months ago about Garrett hiding something, the implication in his tone. I thought about how quickly people could turn on you if they thought you were different, wrong, not one of them. But I also thought about Garrett's eyes, the way he looked at me sometimes like I was something precious he was afraid to touch, the gentleness in his voice when he said my name. Maybe I wasn't as alone as I thought. Or maybe I was reading too much into simple kindness from a man who was just trying to be friendly. Either way, everything had changed. I couldn't unknow what I'd figured out about myself, couldn't unfeel what I felt when Garrett was near. I was 23 years old and I just realized I'd been living my whole life without understanding who I actually was. The question was, what was I going to do about it? The answer, as it turned out, was absolutely nothing. For the next few weeks, I did my best to act normal around Garrett while internally I was a mess of confusion and fear and longing. I helped with shoeing jobs when needed, brought him water during the hot afternoons, made small talk about horses and ranch work. On the surface, nothing changed. But everything felt different. Every accidental brush of our hands when passing tools sent electricity through my skin. Every time he smiled, those rare, genuine smiles that transformed his usually serious face, my heart stumbled. Every evening when I saw the light on in his cabin and imagined him inside, alone like I was alone, I wanted to walk across that distance and knock on his door just to be near him. I didn't, of course. I was terrified. Terrified of rejection, of ruining our friendship, of discovering I'd been completely wrong about any possible mutual feelings. Terrified of what it would mean if I was right. So I did nothing, and the tension between us built like a summer thunderstorm gathering on the horizon. Garrett seemed to sense something was different. He watched me more carefully, his brow furrowing occasionally as if trying to figure out a puzzle. Sometimes I'd catch him starting to say something, then stopping himself. The comfortable ease we developed became slightly strained, filled with unspoken words and careful distance. It might have continued that way indefinitely if not for the 4th of July celebration. Every year, Mr. Harrison threw a big party for the ranch hands and their families, complete with a barbecue, live music, and fireworks. It was one of the few times everyone let loose, drinking and dancing and enjoying a rare day off. Usually I looked forward to it, but this year I was dreading it. The thought of watching Garrett in a social setting, maybe talking to other people, maybe even flirting with someone, the thought made me physically nauseous. But I couldn't skip it without drawing attention, so I showed up wearing clean jeans and my nicest shirt, plastering on a smile and accepting a beer from Marcus. The party was in full swing by the time I arrived. Music blared from speakers someone had set up, the smell of grilling meat filled the air, and people were laughing and talking in clusters around the main yard. I spotted Garrett almost immediately, impossible not to given his size, standing off to the side near the horse paddock, a beer in his hand, watching the festivities with that same careful, distant expression he wore around crowds. He was wearing dark jeans and a gray button-down shirt with the sleeves rolled up, and he looked amazing. The setting sun caught in his dark hair, turned his eyes to molten silver, highlighted the strong lines of his face and the powerful build of his shoulders and chest. I forced myself to look away before anyone noticed me staring. "Hey, Elijah," Tommy appeared at my elbow, already a few beers in from the look of him. "You gonna dance? Sarah from the main house has been asking about you." "I'm good," I said, taking a long drink of my beer. "Come on, man, when's the last time you had any fun? You work too hard." He wasn't wrong, but I had no interest in dancing with Sarah or anyone else. I scanned the crowd again and found Garrett still in the same spot, alone, and made a decision. "I'm gonna get some food," I told Tommy, and headed in Garrett's direction before I could talk myself out of it. He noticed me approaching, his posture shifting slightly, something warming in his eyes. "Hey. Hey yourself, you hiding over here." His lips quirked, observing. "That's a fancy word for hiding." Maybe. He took a drink of his beer, his gaze moving over the crowd, not much of a party person. "Yeah, me neither." We stood in comfortable silence for a few minutes, watching people laugh and dance. The sun was sinking lower, painting everything in shades of orange and pink, and the music shifted to something slower, more melodic. "This is nice," Garrett said quietly. "What Harrison does for everyone, building community, giving people a place to belong." "You say that like it's rare." "It is." He looked at me then, his expression serious. "Most places you're just a worker, replaceable. Harrison treats everyone like family, like they matter. He paused, choosing his words carefully, "that's special." "Is that why you came here, looking for that?" "Maybe, partly." He turned back to the crowd, his jaw tight. "I left my last job because, let's just say not everyone was as accepting as Harrison." My heart started pounding. Accepting of what? Garrett was quiet for a long moment and I thought he might not answer. Then he said very softly, "Of people being different." The words hung between us, heavy with meaning. I knew what he was saying, or at least I thought I did, but I needed to be sure, needed to know if I was really understanding what he was implying. "Garrett." "Elijah, there you are." Jake's voice cut through the moment like a knife, and I turned to see him approaching with a couple of the other hands, all of them clearly drunk. "We're starting a game of horseshoes, you in?" "I'm good, thanks." "Come on, don't be boring. You too, Blackwood, show us what those big arms can do." I saw Garrett's shoulders tense, saw something flash in his eyes that might have been anger or frustration, but he just shook his head, not interested. "What, you too good to hang out with us regular folks?" Jake's tone had turned nasty the way it did when he'd been drinking. "You've been here 4 months and you still act like you're better than everyone." "Jake, leave it alone," I said, my own temper flaring. "I'm just saying it's weird. Guy never talks to anyone, never hangs out, always off by himself. Makes a person wonder what he's hiding." The implication in his voice was clear and I felt rage surge through me. "You're drunk, go sleep it off." "I'm just making conversation, unless you're hiding something too. You and Blackwood seem pretty friendly lately, always hanging around each other, all those private conversations." I didn't think, I just moved. My hand was fisting in Jake's shirt before I realized what I was doing, and I'd shoved him back hard enough to make him stumble. Shut your mouth, I said, my voice low and dangerous. Everything went quiet. People were turning to look, drawn by the sudden tension. Jake's friends were moving closer, and I realized with a sinking feeling that I'd just made everything so much worse. Then Garrett was there, his hand on my shoulder, firm and steady. Elijah, let it go. I released Jake, my hands trembling with adrenaline and anger. Jake was staring at me with a knowing smirk that made me want to hit him. Yeah, Elijah, let it go. Wouldn't want people to get the wrong idea about you and your friend here. That's enough, Mr. Harrison's voice cut through the tension like a whip crack. He'd appeared from somewhere in the crowd, his expression stern. Jake. You're done for the night, go sleep it off in the bunkhouse, now. Jake opened his mouth to argue, saw the look on Harrison's face, and wisely shut up. He shot me one more nasty look before stumbling off with his friends following. The crowd slowly went back to their conversations, but I could feel eyes on us, could hear the whispers starting. I just confirmed everyone's suspicions by losing my temper like that. Sorry, I said to Harrison, my voice tight. I shouldn't have. Jake was out of line, Harrison said firmly. I don't tolerate that kind of talk on my ranch from anyone. He looked between me and Garrett, his expression softening slightly. You two okay? Fine, Garrett said quietly. Thank you, sir. Harrison nodded and walked away, leaving us standing there in the fatting light with the weight of what had just happened settling over us. I'm sorry, I said again, this time to Garrett. I shouldn't have reacted like that, I just made everything worse. You were defending me, defending us. His voice was rough with emotion. No one's ever done that before. I looked up at him, saw something raw and vulnerable in his expression, and felt my breath catch. Garrett. Walk with me. It wasn't really a question. He started toward the path that led away from the party, toward the quieter areas of the ranch, and I followed without hesitation. We walked in silence until the music and voices faded behind us, following the fence line toward the horse pastures. The sun had fully set now, and stars were beginning to appear in the darkening sky. The air was cooler out here, away from the crowd, and I could finally breathe again. Garrett stopped near one of the paddocks where several horses grazed peacefully in the twilight. He leaned against the fence, his hands gripping the top rail, his head bowed like he was gathering his thoughts. I'm gay, he said suddenly, the words dropping into the quiet like stones into still water. That's what I was hiding at my last job, that's why I left. Someone found out and made my life hell until I had no choice but to quit. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might break through my chest. Garrett. Let me finish, he took a shaky breath. I came here thinking I could just keep it quiet, keep to myself, do my work and not get close to anyone so there'd be nothing to find out, nothing to use against me, and it was working until I whispered. He turned to look at me then, and in the dim light I could see the fear and hope warring in his expression. Until this 23-year-old stable hand with sad eyes and a kind heart started bringing me water and helping with difficult horses and making me feel less alone. Until I started looking for you every day, started finding excuses to work near you, started falling for you without meaning to. The world tilted, everything I'd been feeling, all the confusion and fear and longing, suddenly crystallized into perfect clarity. You're falling for me. I know I shouldn't, I know it's dangerous for both of us. I'm trying to stop, I swear I am, but I'm gay too, I blurted out, the words tumbling from my mouth before I could stop them. Or I think I am, I don't really know because I've never felt this way about anyone before. But you, I stopped, my voice breaking. God, Garrett, I think about you constantly, I look for you everywhere, you walk into a room and my heart starts racing. I didn't understand what it meant until a few weeks ago, and then I figured it out and I've been terrified ever since because I didn't know if you felt the same or if I was just imagining things, and I didn't get to finish because suddenly Garrett was moving, closing the distance between us in 2 strides, his hands coming up to cup my face with a gentleness that should have been impossible given their size. You're not imagining anything, he said, his voice rough with emotion. God, Elijah, you have no idea. Then show me, I whispered, my hands coming up to grip his wrists, anchoring myself to him. He searched my eyes for a moment, making sure, giving me a chance to back away. When I leaned into his touch instead, something in his expression softened and heated at the same time. Are you sure? Because once we do this, once we cross this line, there's no going back. I don't want to go back, I swallowed hard. I want you, I think I've wanted you since the day you arrived, I just didn't know what it meant. Garrett's thumb traced my cheekbone, his touch impossibly gentle. You're so young, you deserve someone who can give you a normal life, not someone who has to hide and be careful and. I don't want normal, I interrupted. I want real, I want honest, I want you, Garrett, just you. Something in his expression broke, all that careful control crumbling, and then he was leaning down and I was stretching up and our lips met in a kiss that felt like coming home. It was gentle at first, tentative, both of us learning this new language together. His lips were soft despite the beard, warm and careful against mine. One of his hands slid into my hair while the other settled at the small of my back, pulling me closer, and I melted into him with a sound that might have been relief or joy or both. The kiss deepened, became more urgent, and I felt everything I'd been holding back pour through me, all the longing and fear and desperate need I'd been trying to ignore. Garrett kissed me like I was precious, like I was something worth being careful with, and I'd never felt so seen, so valued, so wanted in my entire life. When we finally broke apart, both of us breathing hard, Garrett rested his forehead against mine, his hands still cradling my face like he was afraid to let go. We have to be careful, he whispered. What Jake said tonight, people are already suspicious if anyone finds out. I know, I tightened my grip on his wrists. I know the risks, I know what could happen, but Garrett, I've spent my whole life being careful, hiding parts of myself I didn't even understand, never letting anyone get too close. I don't want to live like that anymore, not with you. Neither do I, he pulled back slightly to look at me, his eyes searching mine in the darkness. So what do we do? We figure it out together, carefully, slowly, but we don't pretend this didn't happen. We don't go back to being strangers who barely talk. A slow smile spread across his face, transforming it completely, and my heart stuttered at the sight. I don't think I could do that even if I wanted to. Good, I smiled back, feeling lighter than I had in weeks, because I'm not letting you disappear on me now. We stood there for a long time, wrapped around each other, stealing kisses and whispered words while the horses grazed peacefully nearby and the stars wheeled overhead. It felt like standing at the edge of something vast and terrifying and wonderful, and I knew that stepping off this edge meant everything in my life was about to change. But with Garrett's arms around me and his heart beating against my chest, I couldn't bring myself to be afraid. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be, with exactly who I was supposed to be with. Whatever came next, we'd face it together. Reality crashed back in the next morning with all the grace of a freight train. I woke up in my bunk to the sound of the other ranch hands talking in low voices and immediately tensed when I heard my name. Just saying, it was weird. Elijah never loses his temper like that. Jake was being an asshole, you know how he gets when he drinks. Yeah, but why'd Elijah jump on him like that? Unless Jake was actually right about. Keep your voice down, man, Elijah's right there. I kept my eyes closed, feigning sleep while my heart pounded against my ribs. This was exactly what Garrett and I had been worried about. One public confrontation and suddenly everyone was suspicious, watching, wondering. I waited until the voices faded and the bunkhouse emptied before getting up. My whole body ached from tension and I felt like I'd barely slept. But I forced myself through my morning routine, determined to act normal, to not give anyone any reason to keep talking. Garrett was already at the forge when I passed by on my way to the stables and our eyes met briefly. He gave me a small nod, normal, friendly, nothing suspicious, but I saw the concern in his gaze and knew he was thinking the same thing I was. We had to be more careful. The day passed in a haze of work and paranoia. I caught people watching me, conversations stopping when I approached. Jake was nowhere to be seen, probably sleeping off his hangover, but his friends gave me cold looks whenever our paths crossed. Even Marcus, who'd always been friendly, seemed slightly distant. By evening, I was exhausted from the constant vigilance. From second-guessing every interaction, I wanted nothing more than to go to Garrett's cabin to be with someone who knew the truth about me, but I couldn't risk it. Not yet, not when everyone was already watching. Instead, I went to the breaking pen and worked with copper until my arms were shaking and my shirt was soaked through with sweat. Physical exhaustion was better than the mental kind, and at least with horses, I didn't have to pretend to be something I wasn't. You're gonna work yourself into the ground. I spun around to find Garrett leaning against the fence, watching me with worried eyes. The pen was far enough from the main buildings that we were essentially alone, but I still looked around nervously before speaking. I needed to clear my head. I know the feeling. He climbed into the pen, moving slowly so as not to spook Copper, but punishing yourself won't make today any easier. I'm not. I stopped, recognizing the lie. Okay, maybe I am a little. Elijah, he stopped a few feet away, close enough that I could see the fine lines around his eyes, the concern etched in his expression. What happened last night, I don't regret it, not for a second, but I don't want you to hurt yourself trying to prove something to people who aren't worth your time. I'm not trying to prove anything, I'm trying to figure out how to live with this. I gestured between us. How to want this and have this and protect this without destroying everything else I've built here. I know, his voice was soft, understanding. I've been doing that same calculation for 10 years, it never gets easier, but you learn to find moments, small windows when you can breathe freely. Is that enough for you, just moments? It has to be. He looked away, jaw tight. The alternative is not having you at all, and that's not something I'm willing to accept. God, I wanted to kiss him, wanted to close that distance and feel his arms around me again, but we were too exposed here, too visible even in the twilight. Come to my cabin tonight, Garrett said quietly. Late when everyone's asleep, we need to talk about this properly, figure out how to navigate this safely. I nodded, not trusting my voice. He held my gaze for a moment longer, something warm and reassuring passing between us before turning and leaving the pen. I watched him walk away, this man who'd somehow become the center of my world in just a few months, and felt determination settle in my chest. We'd figure this out, we had to. I waited until well past midnight before slipping out of the bunkhouse. All the other hands were asleep, their snores filling the darkness, and I moved as quietly as possible through the shadows toward Garrett's cabin. My heart was pounding by the time I knocked softly on his door. This felt dangerous and thrilling and terrifying all at once, sneaking through the darkness to meet someone, hiding something that felt more real and right than anything I'd ever experienced. Garrett opened the door immediately as if he'd been waiting right there and pulled me inside quickly. The cabin was small but comfortable, lit by a single lamp that cast warm shadows across the space. I caught glimpses of sparse furniture, bookshelves filled with books on metalworking and horses, a neat kitchen area. You okay? Garrett asked, his hands coming up to rest on my shoulders. Anyone see you? I don't think so, everyone was asleep. He relaxed slightly, his hands sliding down my arms to take my hands in his. The gesture was so simple, so intimate that it made my throat tight. I've been thinking all day, he said, leading me to sit on his small couch. About us, about how to do this without risking everything you've built here. I've been thinking about the same thing, I squeezed his hands, and I don't have good answers, but I know I'm not willing to give you up. I'm not asking you to, I'm just saying we need to be smart about this. Careful. He paused, his expression troubled. Elijah, you're young, you're just figuring out who you are. I don't want to be the reason you lose your home, your job, your safety, if people find out and you're not ready. Stop, I cut him off gently. Stop trying to protect me from my own choices. I'm not a kid, Garrett, I know what I'm risking. And yes, I'm still figuring things out, but I know what I feel for you is real. That's not going to change. You can't know that. Can't I? I moved closer, our knees touching. Tell me you don't feel this too. Tell me I'm the only one who feels like the world makes more sense when we're together. You're not. His voice was rough. God, Elijah, you're not, but that doesn't change the facts. We live in a place where being who we are could get us hurt, or worse. Then we're careful, we keep this between us, we act normal in public, save this, I gestured between us, for moments like this, when we're alone. Is that really enough for you, hiding, pretending? I thought about it, really thought about it. Thought about the alternative, going back to the way things were, never touching him, never being honest about what I felt, never having these moments of connection and honesty and belonging. It'll have to be, I said finally. For now, maybe someday things will be different. Maybe we'll figure out a way to live more openly, but right now, having you in secret is better than not having you at all. Garrett's expression softened, something like relief washing over his features. He pulled me closer, wrapping his arms around me, and I buried my face in his neck, breathing in his scent, metal and leather, and something uniquely him. "Okay," he murmured against my hair. "Okay, we'll figure this out together." We stayed like that for a long time, just holding each other in the quiet darkness. Eventually we started talking, really talking about everything. Garrett told me about growing up in Wyoming, about realizing he was different when he was 13 and spending years trying to deny it, about finally accepting himself in his 20s and trying to build a life, only to have it fall apart when someone at his last job found out and made sure everyone knew. "They didn't fire me outright," he said, his voice bitter. "That would have been illegal, but they made it impossible to stay. The harassment, the constant surveillance, the way everyone suddenly had a problem with my work even though nothing had changed. I left before it could get worse. I'm sorry you went through that. It taught me to be careful, maybe too careful." He pulled back to look at me. "I don't want you to have to go through something like that." "Then we make sure I don't. We're careful, we're smart." I took a breath. "Tell me what you need from this, from us." He was quiet for a moment, thinking. "Honesty, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard." "Okay, what else?" "Patience, this is all new to you. You're going to have doubts, questions, moments where you're not sure. I need you to talk to me when that happens, not just disappear." "I can do that." "And he hesitated. "I need you to promise me that if this ever becomes too much, if the hiding and the secrecy and the risk becomes more than you can handle, you'll tell me, that you won't just suffer in silence trying to make it work." "I promise, but Garrett, the same goes for you. If you need more than I can give right now, if you need someone who can be open about this, who can give you a real relationship, you have to tell me." "What I need," he said firmly, cupping my face in his hands, "is you, however I can have you, for as long as you'll let me." I kissed him then, pouring everything I felt into it, gratitude and desire and the fierce determination to make this work somehow. He kissed me back with equal intensity, his hands gentle but sure as they explored my face, my hair, my shoulders. We eventually moved to his bed, fully clothed, just lying together in the darkness and talking in whispers about nothing and everything. He told me about his favorite books, about dreams he'd had for his life before reality had gotten in the way. I told him about my parents, about the ache of losing them and how the ranch had saved me. "You saved yourself?" Garrett insisted. "Harrison gave you an opportunity, but you're the one who worked hard, who made a place here, who earned people's respect." "Most people's respect. Jake's an asshole, his opinion doesn't matter." "His opinion matters if he convinces other people to believe him." Garrett was quiet for a moment. "We'll deal with that if it happens, together." I must have dozed off eventually because I woke to Garrett gently shaking my shoulder. "Elijah, it's almost 5, you need to go back before people start waking up." The reality of our situation came crashing back. I sat up, immediately missing his warmth. "Yeah, okay." He walked me to the door, his hand lingering on my arm. "Be careful, and Elijah." Yes. Last night, this morning, it was good being able to just be ourselves. Thank you for that. I smiled, feeling some of my earlier tension ease. "Thank you for asking me to stay." I slipped out into the pre-dawn darkness, making my way back to the bunkhouse as quietly as possible. I'd almost made it when I heard a sound behind me and spun around, my heart in my throat. It was just one of the ranch dogs, tail wagging hopefully. I released a shaky breath and continued on, making it back to my bunk without incident. But as I lay there pretending to sleep while the other hands began to stir, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was only going to get harder before it got easier. The next few weeks established a pattern that became our new normal. During the day, Garrett and I were friendly but professional coworkers who got along well but maintained appropriate distance. We helped each other with work when needed, made small talk when appropriate, and were careful never to let our gazes linger too long or our touches last longer than strictly necessary. At night, when the ranch was sleeping, I would sneak to his cabin and we would have a few precious hours of honesty. We talked, we kissed, we held each other and pretended the outside world didn't exist. We never went further than that, both of us too aware of the risks, too cautious about crossing lines we couldn't uncross. It was simultaneously wonderful and agonizing. Wonderful because I was learning who Garrett really was beneath the stoic exterior. He was funny in a dry, subtle way that caught me off guard. He was incredibly well-read, his small cabin filled with books on everything from philosophy to poetry. He loved astronomy and could name every constellation visible from the ranch. He hummed while he worked, old folk songs his grandmother had taught him. He had nightmares sometimes about his last job, about being found out and hurt, and I would hold him until he calmed down. Agonizing because every moment we spent together made me want more time, more openness, more of this connection that felt like the most real thing I'd ever experienced. And the constant secrecy was exhausting. Always checking over my shoulder, always calculating who might be watching, always second-guessing every interaction in case someone noticed something suspicious. Jake remained hostile, though he was smart enough not to push things too far after Harrison's warning, but I could feel his eyes on me sometimes, suspicious and searching. A few of the other hands had picked up on his attitude and seemed to be waiting to see if his suspicions were justified. Marcus tried to talk to me one evening after dinner. "Everything okay with you, Elijah? You've been different lately, distracted." "Just tired," I said, which wasn't entirely a lie. "Long season." "Yeah," he studied me for a moment. "Look, I don't know what Jake's problem is and I don't care, but if something's going on, if someone's giving you trouble, you can talk to me. You know that, right?" "I know, thanks, Marcus." He nodded and let it drop, but I could see the concern in his eyes. He was a good guy and part of me wanted to trust him with the truth, but I couldn't risk it, not when it could put both Garrett and me in danger. The strain was starting to show on Garrett too. He was working longer hours, taking on projects that kept him at the forge well past normal quitting time. I suspected he was trying to avoid social situations as much as possible, but it was also wearing him down. "You need to rest," I told him one night, running my fingers through his hair while he lay with his head in my lap. "You're pushing yourself too hard," says the man who works 16-hour days regularly. "That's different." "How?" "Because," I stopped, realizing I didn't have a good answer. "Okay, fine, we're both working ourselves to exhaustion, but that doesn't make it healthy." He caught my hand and brought it to his lips, pressing a kiss to my palm. "This is healthy, these moments with you, everything else is just survival." God, he could say things like that so easily, could be so honest about his feelings in a way I was still learning. It made my chest ache with how much I felt for him. "I wish we could have more than just moments," I admitted quietly. "I wish I could walk across the ranch in daylight and hold your hand. I wish I could introduce you as—" I paused, realizing I didn't know what word to use. Boyfriend seemed too simple for what we were. "As yours," Garrett finished softly. "I wish that too, more than you know. Maybe someday." Maybe, but he didn't sound convinced and I couldn't really blame him. He'd lived with this reality a lot longer than I had. He knew how unlikely it was that things would change. We were quiet for a while, just existing together in our small bubble of safety. Then Garrett said, "I've been thinking about something." "Yes." "There's a ranch about 3 hours south of here. Bigger operation, more hands, more anonymity. They're always looking for good workers. I still have contacts there from my Wyoming days." My heart clenched. "You're thinking about leaving?" "No, God, no." He sat up quickly, turning to face me. "I'm thinking about us leaving together, finding a place where we could be more open, where there's less scrutiny." "You do that, give up your position here. For a chance at having something real with you, without all this hiding." He cupped my face in his hands, in a heartbeat. The offer made emotion well up in my throat. "Garrett, I can't just leave this ranch. It's the only home I've had since my parents died. Harrison took a chance on me when I had nothing, and the work, the horses." I know," he pulled me close. "It was just a thought. I'm not asking you to decide anything. I just wanted you to know that if you ever wanted to try for something more, I'd go with you." I held him tight, torn between gratitude and guilt. He was offering me an escape, a chance at something better, and I couldn't take it. Not yet. Maybe not ever. This ranch was more than just a job to me. It was my identity, my purpose, my proof that I'd survived and built something meaningful from loss. But I also knew that staying meant accepting limitations on what Garrett and I could have together, and I didn't know how long either of us could sustain that. Things came to a head in early August during one of the worst heat waves I could remember. The temperature had been over 100 degrees for 5 days straight, making everything harder. Tempers were short, people were exhausted, and the constant heat made the ranch feel like a pressure cooker waiting to explode. I was working with a particularly difficult mare, trying to treat an infected hoof in the barn when Jake wandered in. He'd been drinking, I could smell it on him even from 10 feet away, and he had that mean look in his eyes that meant he was spoiling for a fight. "Where's your boyfriend?" he asked, the word dripping with contempt. I kept my focus on the horse, my stomach dropping. "Don't know what you're talking about." "Sure you don't? The blacksmith, big guy, heard you've been spending a lot of time at his cabin, late at night." My hands stilled. Someone had seen me. Despite all our caution, someone had noticed. "I've been helping him with some evening projects," I said, keeping my voice steady. "He's teaching me some metalworking skills." "Metalworking?" Jake laughed, the sound harsh and ugly. "That what they're calling it these days? You got something to say, say it." "I'm saying everyone's noticed, you and him always watching each other, always finding excuses to be near each other. The way you jumped to defend him at the party." He moved closer and I could see the cruelty in his expression. "I'm saying everyone knows you're a couple of." "Finish that sentence and I'll make you regret it." We both spun to find Garrett standing in the barn entrance, his expression dark with barely controlled anger. He looked massive in that moment, all his usual gentleness replaced with something hard and dangerous. Jake actually took a step back. "I knew it, I fucking knew it." "You know nothing," Garrett said coldly, "except that you're drunk and making serious accusations without any proof. Now get out of here before I tell Harrison you've been drinking on the job again." "You think Harrison's gonna take your side when he finds out what you really are?" "I think Harrison values good workers over drunken troublemakers, but why don't we go ask him, see what he thinks about your behavior?" Jake's bravado faltered. He was already on thin ice with Harrison after multiple incidents, and he knew it. After a moment of tense silence, he spat on the ground near my feet and stalked out of the barn. The moment he was gone, I felt my legs start to shake. He knows, God, Garrett, he knows. He suspects. That's not the same thing as knowing. But Garrett's voice was tight with worry. "Did anyone else see you coming to my cabin?" "I don't know, I've been so careful, but..." "It only takes one person seeing, one moment of carelessness." He ran a hand over his face, suddenly looking exhausted. "This is what I was afraid of." "What do we do?" "We wait, see what Jake does with his suspicions. And Elijah," he looked at me with something like regret in his eyes, "you might need to distance yourself from me for a while, stop coming to the cabin, maybe even request different work assignments." "No," the word came out fierce, immediate. "I'm not doing that. I'm not giving Jake the satisfaction of thinking he scared us apart. This isn't about pride. It's about not letting fear control our lives. We've been careful, we haven't done anything wrong, and if Jake wants to make accusations, let him. Without proof, he just looks like exactly what he is, a drunk asshole with a grudge." Garrett stared at me for a long moment, something complicated crossing his expression. "You're willing to risk everything, your job, your home, your safety." "I'm willing to risk everything to not lose you," I said quietly, "aren't you?" "You know I am, but Elijah, you're 23, you have your whole life ahead of you. I'm 31, I've already lost one job, one home, I can survive losing another if I have to, but you..." "Stop trying to protect me by making decisions for me," I interrupted. "We're in this together, remember, we figure it out together, that was the deal." He moved closer, his hand coming up to cup my cheek. "You're so much braver than I am." "No, I'm just tired of being afraid." I leaned into his touch, savoring it even though we were in the barn where anyone could walk in. "Whatever happens, we face it together, okay?" "Okay," he whispered, and pulled me into a brief, tight embrace before stepping back and leaving the barn. I stood there in the dusty heat, my heart pounding, knowing that everything was about to change. I just didn't know yet whether it would be for better or worse. Jake kept his mouth shut for 3 days, but I could feel the tension building like a coming storm. He watched us constantly, always with that knowing smirk, like he was waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The other hands noticed, conversations would stop when I entered a room, people avoided meeting my eyes, and the easy camaraderie I'd built over 6 years started to fray. Marcus pulled me aside after dinner on the 3rd day. "Elijah, what's going on? Jake's been spreading rumors." "What kind of rumors?" He looked uncomfortable. "About you and Garrett, about what you two are to each other." My stomach dropped. "And what do you think?" Marcus was quiet for a long moment, studying my face. "I think Jake's always been an asshole who likes making trouble, but I also think..." he paused, choosing his words carefully. I think maybe there's a reason you're not denying it. Marcus, I'm not asking you to tell me anything you're not ready to say, he cut me off gently. I'm just saying, if Jake's right, if you and Garrett are together, you need to be prepared for what might happen when he tells Harrison. You think Harrison would fire us? I don't know, Harrison's fair and he values good work, but this is still Montana, Elijah, still a small community with old-fashioned ideas. I don't know how he'd react. I felt panic rising in my chest. What would you do if it was true? Marcus looked at me for a long moment, his expression sad. I'd hope my friend would have trusted me enough to tell me himself, but I'd also understand why he didn't. He put a hand on my shoulder. Whatever happens, I've got your back, just so you know. The kindness in his voice nearly broke me. Thanks, Marcus, that means more than you know. He nodded and walked away, leaving me alone with my spiraling thoughts. That night I didn't go to Garrett's cabin. It felt too risky, too exposed, but lying in my bunk I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about everything I stood to lose, my job, my home, the respect I'd worked so hard to earn. But I also thought about Garrett, about the way he made me feel seen and valued and whole. Was I really willing to give up everything for this relationship, for something that could never be fully open or acknowledged? The answer, I realized with a strange sort of calm, was yes. Because what Garrett and I had was real in a way nothing else in my life had ever been. It was honest. It mattered. And hiding it, denying it, pretending it didn't exist, that would be a worse betrayal than anything Jake could accuse us of. I'd spent my whole life being careful, being quiet, being what other people expected me to be. Maybe it was time to stop. The decision crystallized in that moment, sharp and clear. I was done hiding, done pretending, done letting fear dictate how I lived. Whatever came next, I'd face it with my head held high. The next morning, I went straight to Harrison's office after breakfast. He looked up in surprise when I knocked. Elijah, everything okay? I need to talk to you about something, about me and Garrett. Harrison's expression shifted, becoming more guarded. I see, sit down. I sat, my hands clenched in my lap, my heart pounding. I know Jake's been saying things, making accusations, and I took a breath. I wanted you to hear the truth from me. Go on. Garrett and I, we're together romantically, have been for a few weeks now. The words felt huge, terrifying, but also somehow freeing. We've been careful, we haven't let it interfere with our work, but I know that might not matter to you, and if you want us to leave, if you want me to leave, I understand. Harrison was quiet for a long moment, his expression unreadable, then he sighed, leaning back in his chair. How long have you known about yourself? The question surprised me. That I'm gay, I figured it out recently, few months ago. And Garrett? He's known for a long time. He left his last job because of it, because people found out and made his life hell. Harrison nodded slowly. I suspected something like that. Man doesn't become that guarded without reason. He looked at me directly. And you're sure about this, about him? You're not just experimenting or confused? I've never been more sure of anything in my life, I said honestly. He makes me happy, makes me feel like I matter, like I'm worth something beyond just the work I do. You are worth something, Elijah, with or without him, I hope you know that. I do, but with him I feel it. Harrison was quiet again, and I held my breath, waiting for the axe to fall. Finally he said, I'm not going to fire you, either of you. Relief crashed through me so suddenly I felt dizzy. You're not. No, you're both excellent workers, and what you do on your own time is your business. But Elijah, you need to understand the position this puts me in. If word gets out, and with Jake shooting his mouth off, there are going to be problems. Some of the hands won't like it, some of the guests might complain, and I can protect you both up to a point, but I can't control what other people think or say. I know, I understand the risks. Do you? Because this isn't just about losing a job, son. This is rural Montana. Some people out here, they don't just disapprove, they get violent. You could get hurt. Both of you could. I know, I said again, but living a lie, pretending to be something I'm not, that's a different kind of hurt, and I'm done doing that. Harrison studied me for a long moment, then nodded. Okay, here's what we're going to do. I'll talk to Jake, make it clear that harassment of any kind isn't tolerated on my ranch. You and Garrett keep doing your jobs, keep being professional, and we'll deal with any issues as they come up. Fair. More than fair, thank you, sir, really. Don't thank me yet, this is going to get harder before it gets easier. He stood and I did the same. And Elijah, be careful, both of you, I'd hate to lose either of you. I left his office feeling like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders, but also aware that Harrison was right, this was just the beginning. Things were about to get much more complicated. I went straight to the forge and found Garrett working on a complicated piece of tack repair. He looked up when I entered, his expression immediately concerned. What happened? I told Harrison about us. Garrett's face went pale. You what? I told him everything, that we're together, that I'm gay, all of it. Elijah, he set down his tools and came toward me. Why would you do that? We could've. We could've what? Kept hiding, kept sneaking around. Garrett, Jake was going to tell him anyway, at least this way Harrison heard it from us first, and I felt a smile spread across my face. He's not firing us, he said, as long as we keep being professional, he doesn't care what we do on our own time. Garrett stared at me like I'd just told him the sun rose in the west. He's okay with it. He understands there might be problems with some of the other hands, but yeah, he's okay with it. He's going to talk to Jake, make it clear that harassment won't be tolerated. God, Garrett sat down heavily on his workbench, running a hand over his face. I can't believe you did that, I can't believe he. You don't have to hide anymore, I said, moving to stand in front of him. We don't have to hide, we can actually be together openly, well, as openly as we're comfortable with. He looked up at me, his eyes shining with something that might have been tears. Do you have any idea what that means to me, to not have to pretend, to not have to constantly look over my shoulder? I think I'm starting to. He pulled me close then, his arms wrapping around my waist, his face pressed against my stomach. I ran my fingers through his hair, feeling him shake slightly with the force of his emotion. Thank you, he whispered, for being brave enough to do what I couldn't. We're doing this together, remember? You've been brave your whole life, Garrett. You survived everything that came before. This is just us finally getting to live honestly. He pulled back to look at me, his hands settling on my hips. I love you, I don't think I've said that yet, but I do. I love you, Elijah Carter. My heart stuttered, then seemed to expand until it filled my entire chest. I love you too, so much it scares me sometimes. Good scary or bad scary? Good scary, the kind that means this matters, that you matter. He stood then, pulling me into a proper kiss, the first one we'd shared in daylight in a space where anyone could walk in. It felt different than our secret kisses in his cabin, more real somehow, more significant. When we broke apart, both of us were smiling. So what happens now? Garrett asked. Now we deal with whatever comes next, together. What came next was exactly what Harrison had warned us about: pushback, gossip, and hostility from several of the ranch hands. Jake was the worst, making crude comments whenever he thought he could get away with it. A few others followed his lead, and suddenly the easy workplace I'd known for 6 years became uncomfortable and tense. But there were also surprises. Marcus publicly called Jake out during dinner one night when he made a particularly nasty comment, saying loudly enough for everyone to hear, "You got a problem with Elijah and Garrett, take it up with Harrison. Otherwise, shut your mouth and do your job." Tommy, the young hand who'd always been friendly, started sitting with us at meals, pointedly ignoring Jake's glares. Even some of the older hands, men I'd expected to be the most judgmental, just shrugged and said things like, long as they do their work, ain't my business. It wasn't universal acceptance by any means. There were still people who wouldn't look at us, who requested different work assignments to avoid being around us. But it also wasn't the complete ostracism I'd feared. And having Garrett by my side through all of it made every difficult moment bearable. We were careful about public displays of affection. This was still a workplace, and we wanted to maintain professionalism. But we no longer had to pretend we weren't together. We could eat meals together, could work on projects together, could simply exist in the same space without constantly calculating who might be watching. Most importantly, Garrett moved into my cabin, a small building I'd been renting from Harrison that was more private than the bunkhouse. Having him there, being able to fall asleep in his arms and wake up next to him, felt like a luxury I'd never imagined possible. "Is this really happening?" Garrett asked one night as we lay in bed, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on my back. "Are we really getting to have this?" Seems like it. I keep waiting for something to go wrong, for Harrison to change his mind or for things to get worse or... Hey, I propped myself up to look at him. Things might still get worse. This isn't a fairy tale where everything is suddenly perfect, but we're together, we're honest, and we have people supporting us. That's more than either of us had before. You're right, he pulled me down for a kiss. I just never thought I'd have this, someone who accepted me completely, a place where I could be myself, a future that felt possible instead of just endurable. Well, now you do, we both do. He smiled, that full, genuine smile that still made my heart skip. Now we both do. A month later, we were working on a project together, repairing a section of fence near the north pasture, when Garrett suddenly stopped and pointed toward the mountains. Look at that sunset. I turned to look. The sky was painted in shades of orange and pink and purple, the mountains dark silhouettes against the brilliant colors. It was breathtaking. It's beautiful, I said. It is, but when I glanced over, Garrett wasn't looking at the sunset anymore. He was looking at me. You know what's even more beautiful, though? What? This, us, the fact that we get to stand here together and just be, no hiding, no pretending, just us exactly as we are. I felt emotion well up in my throat. Yeah, that is pretty beautiful. I know things aren't perfect. I know we still deal with shit from people like Jake. I know small-town Montana isn't exactly a gay paradise. He took my hand, his thumb brushing over my knuckles. But Elijah, I've never been happier than I am right now, right here with you. Me neither. I squeezed his hand, looking out at the sunset and the land we both loved. This is home, your home. Then I guess we're both home, Garrett said softly, finally. We stood there as the sun sank lower, our hands linked, the future uncertain but somehow less frightening than it had been. We had each other, we had this place. We had the possibility of building something real and lasting. It wasn't a fairy tale. There would be more hard days, more prejudice to face, more challenges to overcome. But we'd face them together with honesty and love and the quiet strength that came from finally being able to live as our true selves. And standing there in the fading light with Garrett's hand in mine, I knew that whatever came next, we'd be okay. We'd be more than okay. We'd be happy. 6 months later, on a cold February morning, I woke to find Garrett already awake, watching me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Morning, I mumbled, still half asleep. Morning, he brushed my hair back from my forehead. I've been thinking about something. Dangerous, I teased. Probably, he took a breath. Remember when I mentioned that ranch south of here, the bigger operation? My stomach dropped. Yeah, why? They offered me a position. Head farrier, better pay, more resources. It's a good opportunity. I sat up, suddenly wide awake. You're leaving. No, he sat up too, taking my hands in his. Not unless you want to. They need experienced, stable hands too, good ones. I told them I had someone in mind for the position if he was interested. You want us to leave Copper Creek together. I want us to have more options, more freedom. The ranch down south, it's bigger, more progressive. The foreman there is openly gay, has been with his partner for 15 years. They have other LGBTQ+ staff. It's not perfect, but it's a place where we wouldn't have to deal with people like Jake, where we could just live. I thought about it, really thought about it. Copper Creek was home, had been for 6 years. But it was also the place where I'd lost my family, where I'd spent years not understanding myself, where I still faced whispers and judgment. What do you want to do? I asked. I want to do whatever makes you happy. If that means staying here, we stay. If it means trying somewhere new, we try. He cupped my face in his hands. As long as I'm with you, I'm good. I kissed him slow and deep, then pulled back with a smile. Let's do it. Let's try somewhere new. Yes. Yeah, I love this ranch and I'm grateful for everything it's given me, but maybe it's time to build something new, somewhere we can both be completely ourselves without any reservations. Garrett's smile was brilliant. Okay then, we'll tell Harrison today, give him plenty of notice to find replacements, and Elijah. Yes. Thank you for taking this chance with me, for choosing us over comfort. I'm not choosing us over comfort, I said. I'm choosing us as comfort, as home, wherever we are, as long as we're together, that's where I belong. He kissed me again and I felt the last piece of fear and uncertainty fall away. We were doing this. We were choosing each other, choosing honesty, choosing a life where we didn't have to hide or compromise who we were. It was terrifying and exciting and absolutely right. 3 months later. The new ranch was everything Garrett had promised and more. The work was challenging, the people were welcoming, and for the first time in my life I didn't have to think twice about holding Garrett's hand in public or introducing him as my partner. We had a small cabin on the property, bigger than Garrett's old place at Copper Creek, with room for both our belongings and dreams for the future. We worked together sometimes, ate meals in the communal dining hall where other couples, both straight and gay, did the same and spent our evenings planning the life we wanted to build together. It wasn't always easy. There were still moments of fear, still occasional harassment when we went into town, still days when the weight of being different felt heavy, but we had each other, we had community, we had hope. And on clear nights, we'd stand outside our cabin and look up at the stars. The same stars that shone over Copper Creek, over every place we'd been and every place we'd yet to go, and feel grateful for the journey that had brought us here. "No regrets?" Garrett asked one night, his arm around my shoulders. "Not a single one," I said honestly. "You. My only regret is not doing this sooner, not being brave enough years ago to reach for this kind of happiness." "You were brave, you survived until you found me. That took incredible strength." "We found each other," he corrected, "and somehow, against all odds, we get to keep each other." I leaned into him, feeling the solid warmth of his body, the steady beat of his heart. "Forever, if I have anything to say about it." "Forever," he agreed. "I like the sound of that." We stood there in the quiet darkness, two men who'd found each other in the least likely of places, who'd fought for their right to love openly and honestly, who'd built something beautiful from nothing but hope and determination. Our story wasn't over. There would be more challenges ahead, more obstacles to overcome, more moments of fear and doubt. But we'd face them all together with the same courage and honesty that had brought us this far. And standing there under the vast Montana sky with the man I loved, I knew with absolute certainty that every struggle, every risk, every terrifying moment of vulnerability had been worth it. We were home. We were happy. We were free. And that was everything. Belle, if you loved this journey of Elijah and Garrett, please like this video and subscribe to the channel for more heartfelt stories.